You know, the Freddie Awards have really been kind of interesting in looking at the winners, if you will. Because when the Freddies first started, 1988, I believe, the winners were who you might expect back then. It was the legacy carriers, those big behemoth frequent flyer programs. They had the largest member bases, and they got the most votes out, and people were relatively happy. I mean, we're talking about 1988, and frequent flyer programs were still relatively new back then, and everybody was happy. They were getting their awards. They were just thankful to get an upgrade once in a while. So I think that's what you saw to begin with. And then in terms of the trends, interestingly enough, the Freddie Awards has been a trend spotter, if you will, because it was in the early 90s to the late 90s, mid 90s, that you started to see a change in there. And while the legacy carriers had won most of the awards up to then, Continental One Pass, United Mileage Plus, but all of a sudden you saw, I remember the first year that Southwest kind of crept into the top three and actually won a Freddie Award, and afterwards it was like everybody kept, Southwest, do they even have a frequent flyer program? It was like the industry, if you will, wasn't quite ready for, who's Southwest? They're you know, just some little airline, almost a crop duster out of Texas. But the interesting thing, it was right before the real attention turned to low-cost carriers. And when I look back at the Freddies, it's like, wow, we really did see the coming of low-cost carriers and kind of the boutique airlines if we look back at the Freddie results. But at the time, I didn't really know what they meant. But that was a real trend. You saw the trend from legacy carriers into kind of low-cost carriers. And for the last number of years, Southwest Airlines, Alaska Airlines, they really do well for a small carrier because they have alliances with everybody. I mean, one of the things that good about the legacy carriers is they have a lot of relationships with international carriers. When you look at Alaska, who's won a number of Freddie Awards in the last few years, along with Southwest. But Alaska, they have partnerships with American Airlines, Delta, Continental, Northwest, Air France. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And while they're a little carrier, if you're a member of that program, you kind of like the idea that you can go anywhere, fly any airline almost, and get credit to that program. And so a real trend in there. And you kind of see that similarly around the world, honestly, because when the international part of the Freddies were get going, you saw the winners, the big ones, Lufthansa's, the Singapores, the Cathays. But all of a sudden, the last few years, it's been all Middle East, all the new carriers. I mean, 8, 9 years ago, would you have heard of Etihad Airlines or Jet Airways or Emirates or Qatar or Kingfisher or some of the others that have come about? But you know, that's kind of the change. If we look at the industry kind of in a rear-view mirror, I think you'd find that the Freddies have almost forecast kind of the change in the environment, and along with that comes a frequent flyer program, because for all the winners these days, especially out of Middle East and India, they're like what we would refer to as second-generation programs. They kind of look back at what was working for the winners, let's say the Freddies, or what was working with the legacy carriers in different regions of the world, and kind of studied what could make them better, or taking the best of those. You look at Australia and see the very positive success of Virgin Blue down there. But again, boutique, smaller airlines are certainly taking a lot of Freddies these days. However, this year, as we've seen for the last 2 or 3 years, the legacy carriers, the bigger carriers, are starting to creep back in. I mean, Continental is finishing in the top 3 again. We've seen Delta kind of in there. We've seen United Airlines kind of rise in EMEA or Europe, Middle East. You've seen Virgin, you've seen British Airways starting to kind of be in play there, certainly among the top 5. And while Japan, Asia, if you will, is still somewhat dominated by some of the boutique carriers, you still see some of the legacies. Korean Air comes to mind. I mean, they've made an impressive job the last couple of years. So I see a trend coming back again to some of the bigger programs, the legacy carriers, and we'll see what the future holds.